In my most viewed video, I showed real examples of SPC flooring failures and explained why they happen. SPC stands for Stone Polymer Composite, and it became extremely popular under the marketing term waterproof flooring. But after reading some of the comments, I realized I should clarify something. SPC is not a bad product. I have customers who've had SPC for over 10 years with absolutely no issues. Floor failures are not random. There are always a reason behind it. And in the field, almost every failure I've seen had a clear cause. So today, instead of focusing on failure, I want to walk through how to prevent it, from product selection to long-term use. Hi, I'm Andrew from Maro Pacific, a flooring contractor based in Orange County, Southern California. The failure can begin before the floor is ever installed. It starts with choosing the right product for your situation. I generally recommend board thickness of at least 6 mm, excluding the attached padding. Can 4 or 5 mm work? Yes, if the subfloor is perfectly flat, which in reality is rare. When the subfloor isn't perfectly flat, thinner boards are far more vulnerable. A thicker core usually means a thicker, stronger locking system and better resistance to long-term stress. The thin locking mechanism is still my biggest concern with the SPC today. Thickness alone doesn't guarantee the quality, but very thin SPC increases the risk. Look for at least a 20 mm wear layer along with the proper protective top coating. Surface treatments such as UV coating or aluminum oxide reinforcement can greatly improve scratch resistance. Without proper surface treatment, SPC can be surprisingly easy to scratch. Subfloor preparation. This is where the most SPC failures begin. Not with the product, but with the preparation. Most manufacturers allow a tolerance of at least about 3/16 inch within 10 feet. But it's not just about the overall tolerance. It also has to be smooth. Even a sudden 1/16 of an inch height difference that runs along the locking system can cause failure. Concrete slabs often look flat, but they rarely are. There are high spots, low spots, and old repair patch marks. Always grind down the high spots and fill low areas properly. I use self-leveling compound, and it has to be used correctly. Concrete on the first floor is relatively stable, but second floors are different. They rely on joist, plywood, and fasteners. Over time, nails loosen and wood shrinks and minor deflection develops. In older homes, the load-bearing walls often remain stable, but the areas between them can sag slightly over time. That creates subtle dips in the floor. Not too dramatic, but enough for a rigid floor to reveal. I often explain it like this. Carpet is like a big, loose dress. It hides all the imperfections underneath. However, SPC and laminate are like skinny jeans. They reveal level differences and structural imperfections. If the structure moves, SPC moves with it, and that movement eventually transfers into the locking system. Before installation, leveling comes first, always. Make sure the floor is properly flattened, eliminate squeaks, secure loose subfloor panels, and evaluate the joist movement. In many cases, what looks like a flooring issue is actually structural. Subfloor preparation alone prevents the majority of SPC failures. SPC is a floating floor. It needs room to move. Typically, you should leave about 1/4 of an inch around walls and fix the object. The most common mistakes include installing it tight against the walls, placing kitchen cabinets or islands on top of the flooring, or heavy built-ins that restrict the movement. When the movement is restricted, the pressure builds internally and transfers into the locking system, eventually leading to failure. Any additional underlayment can create a vertical movement. Laminate can tolerate a small amount of that movement, but I've seen SPC failures caused by additional padding, even when it was marketed as a very firm, noise-reducing underlayment, specifically approved for SPC flooring. In SPC, repeated vertical compression weakens the locking edges over time. Even the smallest vertical movement can accumulate stress in a click-lock system. SPC performs best on firm, stable support. If the product already has attached pad, additional padding should not be added. Only if moisture protection is needed, a thin plastic vapor barrier should be used. Manufacturers claim that SPC is waterproof, and that's true on the surface, but moisture vapor from below is a completely different story. Over concrete slabs, I recommend installing a vapor barrier regardless of moisture test results. Now, even perfect installation can fail under certain conditions. Static weight is usually not a problem, but repeated rolling loads from desk chairs or wheelchairs can fatigue the locking system. Even the slightest vertical movement, repeated hundreds or thousands of times, gradually adds stress. I've seen this happen within just a few months. Polyurethane wheels may perform better, but I personally recommend using a proper chair mat. Make sure it's a flat, non-spiked type. I've seen sections of a flooring damaged because a tenant used a spiked chair mat over engineered wood. For heavy furniture like pianos, use load-distributing pads like casters to reduce concentrated pressure. Floating floors should not be anchored in anywhere. Kitchen islands and large aquariums or partition walls, these fixed structures must not restrict the movement. The same principle applies during the repairs. I've seen cases where someone tried injecting glue underneath the floor to stop the movement. The client said she was satisfied when it was done, but about a year later, the shoulder joints nearby started to buckle. Eventually, the homeowner had to replace the entire downstairs floor. The reason is simple. SPC flooring is designed to move as a floating system. If one section is anchored to the subfloor, that spot becomes a stress point. And when the floor expands or contracts, the pressure builds up around that area. So in general, anchoring SPC flooring is not recommended. That said, in my experience, there are a few specific situations where glue injection repair can actually work. I'll show when that repair actually works in another video. From my perspective as a contractor, if something goes wrong, I'm the one responsible. So I always approach SPC installation with more caution than most other flooring materials. If my wife insisted on installing SPC flooring in our house, this is how I would approach it. First, I would ask her to consider laminate flooring. In many situations, laminate can actually perform better, especially upstairs. But if she wouldn't follow my suggestion like everything else, then I would choose SPC flooring with at least a 6mm core thickness without attached padding. In other words, around 8mm or thicker total thickness with the pads included. Then I would spend extra time making sure the subfloor as smooth as possible, even though I know it can never be perfectly flat. Over concrete slabs, I would always install proper moisture protection and make sure there is enough expansion space around the entire perimeter. For plywood subfloors, the surface also has to be smooth and leveled properly. During the installation, I would make sure the floating floor has no anchor point anywhere. And the same rule applies during any repairs. Inside a house, there would be no wheelchairs or rolling carts, and every desk would have a proper chair mat underneath. And if any water spill on the floor, it should be wiped up immediately. I try to cover most of the major causes of SPC flooring failures and how to prevent them. But even when everything is done correctly, failures can still happen. My Why SPC Fails video has generated a lot of discussion, and I've been responding to the comments myself. If there's something specific you'd like to know, leave it below. I read the comments and I do my best to respond. Or it could be a future subject for another video. If this video was helpful, consider subscribing for more practical insights on flooring or something else. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.